Russia, which invaded Ukraine, is suffering the biggest defeat in its history. Putin made the most important mistake of his political life by invading Ukraine. Putin is losing power in Russia every day. The Russian army is shocked by the Ukrainian military operations. Russian leader Putin can do nothing in the face of Ukraine's operations. Let's take a closer look at Ukraine's latest operations and Russia's losses. The Ukrainian army carried out a very important operation this morning. There was a very violent explosion in Kadivka in the Russian-occupied Luhansk region. The Ukrainian army blew up the Russian base in this city. As a result of this attack with HIMARS, the Russian army suffered a very heavy loss. It is said that the Ukrainian army gained an important advantage to liberate Kadivka. The Russian army may have to withdraw from this region to avoid further losses. Kadivka is one of the easternmost cities in Ukraine. Kadivka is only an hour away from the center of Luhansk. If the Ukrainian army succeeds in liberating Kadivka, it will gain a significant advantage to liberate the center of Luhansk. The range of Ukrainian HIMARS is close enough to hit Russian bases in Luhansk. The Russian army has started to increase security measures in Luhansk. This has caused a great panic in Russia. Earlier, Russia had to withdraw from Kherson, the largest regional capital it had occupied. If the Russian army now retreats in Luhansk, it will be admitting defeat in this war. Moreover, Luhansk Oblast is on the border between Ukraine and Russia. If Ukraine succeeds in liberating this city, it will have advanced to the Russian border. Many military bases in Russia will also be within range of the Ukrainian army. Russia is very afraid of losing Luhansk. Luhansk is one of Putin's most important regions. Russia was planning to occupy and destabilize this region. This would create an unstable zone between Ukraine and Russia, and Russia would continue to damage Ukraine's economy and security. But the Ukrainian army is determined to win this war. Ukrainian leader Zelensky has been making very decisive and bold statements since the beginning of the war. Zelensky has promised to ensure the liberation of all regions of Ukraine. Thanks to Zelensky's decisive statements, the motivation of the Ukrainian army is increasing. Zelensky is leading this resistance very successfully. Ukraine's leader Volodymyr Zelensky took over the country in 2019. Before entering politics, Zelensky was a screenwriter and actor. He was able to cheer up the whole Ukrainian people with his jokes. In 2015, Zelensky played a character who became the leader of Ukraine in a television series called Servant of the People. His solutions and methods were highly appreciated by the Ukrainian people. Zelensky became one of the most popular people in the country. The Servant of the People party was then founded, and Zelensky began to govern Ukraine as the candidate of this party. While governing his country, Zelensky was as successful as he had written the whole scenario himself. Zelensky wanted Ukraine to become a more free and developed state. To this end, he established closer relations with Western states. He started negotiations with NATO against Russia's invasion attempt. This situation worried Putin a lot. Putin was very afraid that Ukraine would become a NATO member, neighboring Russia. To prevent this, he decided to invade Ukraine. According to Putin, this invasion would be quite easy. Putin, who has ruled Russia since 1999, has fought many wars before. Putin therefore underestimated Zelensky and thought that this war would be over in a very short time. But Zelensky managed to become the leading role in this story too. Zelensky's successful performance became Putin's nightmare. As a result of Zelensky's statements, the Ukrainian army carried out much bolder operations. The Ukrainian army managed to liberate more than half of the territories occupied by Russia. The Russian army suffered huge losses due to this resistance. The Ukrainian Defense Ministry shared a list of the total losses suffered by Russia in this war. According to the data shared in this list, Russia's total losses are as follows: 96,590 soldiers, 2,975 tanks, 5,946 armored combat vehicles, 1,943 artillery systems, 1,644 drones, 281 airplanes, 264 helicopters, The death toll of Russian soldiers is expected to reach 100,000 very soon. Putin is leading his own people to death. Putin does not care about the lives of Russian soldiers. He only wants to win a political victory by winning this war. Even though the death toll is increasing day by day, Putin does not plan to withdraw from this war, because Putin knows very well that if he loses this war, his political career will be over. Putin is going through the most difficult times of his career. In fact, nothing was easy for Putin before this war started. The Russian economy had started to deteriorate and Putin's opponents had gained serious political momentum. Putin planned to strengthen his political authority and reputation by invading Ukraine. But nothing turned out as Putin had hoped. Reactions against Putin have started to grow due to Russia's failure in Ukraine. Putin, who presented himself as a national hero, suffered a great loss of reputation due to this defeat. On the other hand, it was also revealed that Putin lied to his own people during this process. Putin was hiding the death toll. However, Russian citizens communicating through social media exposed Putin's lies. Putin's lies caused great anger in Russia. On the other hand, very heavy sanctions were imposed on Russia because of this war. The Ukrainian leader Zelensky, thanks to his statements, got the Western powers to impose sanctions on Russia. Because of these sanctions, the Russian economy suffered a huge damage. The deterioration of the economy put Putin in a difficult situation. Putin thinks that he has to win this war to keep his power, but the Russian army is not as enthusiastic as Putin in this war. Some Russian soldiers are deserting the army. Hundreds of soldiers in the Russian army also stopped fighting and surrendered. This has completely disorganized the Russian army. The Kremlin can do nothing against this reluctance of Russian soldiers. A report in the British press yesterday showed very clearly the problems in the Russian army. A Russian soldier decided to leave his army and join the ranks of Ukraine in this war. This soldier was captured by the Russian army and tried for treason. Sergei Ulukhshunov, 30 years old from Krasnoyarsk in Siberia, was convicted by the district court. Sergei Ulukhshunov was sentenced to 4 years and 8 years in prison. This verdict was widely reported in the Russian press. Pro-Putin media outlets in Russia tried to send a message to Russian soldiers by sharing this news. It was emphasized that Russian soldiers who quit the war would be tried for treason. This news was repeatedly shared among Russian soldiers. Russian soldiers are being forced to fight in Ukraine. On the other hand, Putin's government is recruiting prisoners into the army in Russia. Many criminals joined the Russian army on condition that they would be released after the war. Prisons in Russia have become overcrowded. The main reason was that there were not enough prisons in Russia to imprison the opponents of the war. Putin sends real criminals to war and imprisons his opponents. The Kremlin can do nothing in the face of the Russian army's defeats. No Kremlin effort has been enough to change the course of this war. Russian leader Putin is on the verge of a major defeat. What do you think about the defeats of the Russian army? How do you think this war will end? How do you think Putin's political career will be shaped once the war is over? Share your views with us. Follow us for more updates.